for a public speaker, this is actually quite daunting because my mum's here, my daughters are here, my husband's here, friends, and quite a lot of people are here tonight who were here back in 2019. And then, I don't think anybody really understood, certainly lay people, what AI actually meant. And so, 3 years on, it's amazing. I mean, 85,000 words is quite an undertaking. So it was a year of effort. And I just want to explain a little bit about why I did it, what it's about. And then what I'm going to do is sit here with 2 or 3 people and just give you some insights firsthand. I'm not a technologist, so I am here really to spread the word. And I've done this because I need to stay ahead. At 55, when you've been in marketing for 30 years, you can't rest on your laurels. I was ahead of the game with digitization, when people were really skeptical about social media. It was a fad, it would go away, it would never take off. And I've done the same with AI. But there are some wonderful people in the room, data scientists. They're the smart people, they're the ones who know how to code. That's not what I do. What I do is teach people how to apply AI and machine learning to the business world. And that's what the book's about. So it's a collection of case studies from incredible brands, people like Rolls-Royce and many, many others, banks, retailers, all sorts of people. And it's telling people what AI is not. AI is not the big, shiny robot coming and taking our jobs. AI is augmented intelligence, it's insight, it's big data. So what we're really talking about here is not the robot that's maybe flipping the burgers in McDonald's catering, or the robot that's going around the floors cleaning when we've all been here, later this evening. It might be people like Frazee, who are here at the back, who use it to help people do very personalized marketing and to get insights. So whether you are like Lord Tim, somebody in the Houses of Parliament, whether you are a barrister, a doctor, medical doctor, any kind of profession, this is not going to take away your job. This is going to give you insights. And I'm thankful, we all should be really, that we are sitting here tonight without masks and that AI sped up the vaccine development. So it used to take about 10 or 15 years to do a vaccine, for a disease like COVID. And AI has been able to speed that up. So our human brains are incredible, but the AI can crunch the data and can look at all of those scans and can actually help us. And I think going forward, and I wish my dad had been young enough to benefit from how AI is going to help with cancer care. He was here at my 2019 book launch, but sadly passed away in October of last year, as did my mother-in-law. They're too old. They were in their mid-80s. They were too old to benefit from the way that AI is going to transform healthcare. But you all here are benefiting from it already. So I think it's fantastic that it's shaping our world. It's shaping what we do in our social lives. It's there when you upload a photo to Facebook and it does image recognition and it says, you should tag Katie, for example. So it's there in Facebook, it's there in our healthcare. Soon it will be there in education. My husband Terry is a teacher. It's not going to take away the job of a teacher, but he could be teaching 30 children and have real insights and deliver a really personalised lesson to all 30 children in the room who might have different languages, different educational needs. So smart education, smart healthcare, smart marketing, smart sales is what we can look forward to over the next few years. So the book, as I say, features some of the wonderful brands in the room today. It also talks about the upskilling agenda. And I'm delighted to have 2 people here from Code First Girls, and they'll be talking to us a bit about the gap that there is. We're not teaching, you can learn data science and computing in your A-levels, but you're not taught if you're studying fashion or marketing or construction or media. You have no idea how AI is going to reshape those different careers. So organisations like Code First Girls help do the programming and they do it for free, but other organisations that are featured in the book teach people about how it's being used in all different job functions. Okay, so the book's primarily about AI for sales, for marketing, for customer experience, but it's much bigger than that. And soon Lord Tim Clement-Jones and I are going to talk about ethics and privacy and some of the big issues, regulation, that are still worrying people. You know, your data, how that gets shared and so on. So we'll be talking about that. But I want to start off, first of all, by calling back Caroline Gorski from Rolls-Royce, from the R2 factory, the R2 factory, sorry. And we're going to sit here and have a fireside chat and explore some of the themes in the book. So looking forward to mingling with you all afterwards. When we finish, there'll be an hour or so of more drinks and cocktails and some lovely canapes. But if you would indulge us for half an hour or so, we're going to share with you some of the insights from the book. Thank you very much.
Right, okay, sorry.
Thank you, Caroline. So as I said, Caroline is the Group Director of R2 Data Labs and also CEO of the R2 factory, which she told you a little bit about at the beginning. So Caroline is the first interview in the book and one of the deeper, more detailed interviews, which is fantastic. So I would like to just bring out, through asking Caroline 4 or 5 questions, some of the main messages that you ask in the book, if that's okay, Caroline.
Sure.
So the first one, if you could set the scene for our guests about the impact that you believe AI is having on business. It's fine hearing from me and some of my other contributors, but I'd love Caroline, with her expertise, to share some of those impacts.
Thank you, Katie. So I want you to think about the fact that AI as a technology has been around for nearly 100 years, approaching certainly 70 odd years. Now, over that period of time, it's been through multiple AI winters, opportunities where the technology stagnated, where the kind of approaches that were being used didn't deliver on the promise that might have been offered. But it's been around for an extremely long time. And when you think about it in that context, it becomes less surprising to hear that Rolls-Royce, as the manufacturer of highly complex machinery, global power provider across lots and lots of categories, has actively been working in both advanced data analytics and indeed the deployment of artificial intelligence for almost 40 years. So we've been very much doing this work as part of the bread and butter that we think about. And we think about advanced data analytics and AI not simply in understanding how we might consider new opportunities for design or ideas about how we might think about new approaches to manufacturing our products, but actually our most advanced areas for AI are in how our products are operated by our customers across their life, and how indeed you work to make sure that those products are being used efficiently and safely and effectively. And that activity is what underpins what you may have heard of as power by the hour. It's the ability for us to use data to help manage the operational risk and the operational benefits of our complex machinery as our customers use it, all across the life cycle of that machinery. And in the case, for example, of a defence aerospace engine, that might be 60 or 70 years of life cycle. So it's critically important to us to have that capability. And it's something that we've been building for a long time. And so when Katie asked me this question about what does AI mean, for me, AI in most organizations is rapidly moving into a state of ubiquitousness. It's rapidly moving into a state where we don't even really realize it's there, because it's becoming fundamental to many of the processes that we use. When you submit a CV, for example, for a new job, generally speaking, the first sift of those CVs is done by a natural language processing AI. You may not be aware of that yourselves, but that's exactly what's happening. Every time you consume media, the choices that you have of the media you consume are all, without exception, predicated for you by an AI recommendation engine. It doesn't matter whether you're looking at ITV, the BBC, CNN, Sky News, all of them. There is a recommendation, there is a sequencer and a scheduler recommendation engine that's AI-driven underpinning that function. Even if you think about how your washing machine understands which particular program to run based on the weighing it does of your laundry and what you tell it about how soiled that laundry is, increasingly, not universally, but increasingly, even that is delivered by an analytics program or possibly a machine learning device. So I think it's going everywhere. And for businesses, that can feel scary, because it can feel like We don't have the skills to think about this. We're buying technologies from our vendors that we don't properly understand. We're not really sure about how our business and our employees are going to change. And goodness me, how on earth do we keep up if we're a consumer-facing business with the demands of our consumers based on what they are experiencing from more advanced AI businesses?
Absolutely. So Caroline, we've got lots of businesses in the room, people that run businesses like Bank of America, Chartered Institute of Marketing, their own data analytics companies. I think they'd be keen to hear from you because we hear lots of buzzwords around business transformation and so on. What do you think the ingredients are for a successful deployment of AI? And I'm thinking of things like culture, for example, in the organisation. So just a few words on that would be really helpful.
Of course. Now, here's a secret, which isn't so much of a secret because I've been telling it whoever will listen to me about it for as long as I can. Anyway, so I apologise if you've heard me say it before. There are really only two really hard bits attached to successfully deploying AI in a sizable organisation. And neither of them is about algorithms. Now, that's not to say that my beautiful data science community who work here in the R² factory aren't brilliant. They are, they're amazing, and they do extraordinary things. But actually, the maths bit, whilst it's hard work, and whilst the skills to do it are still relatively limited, and whilst therefore you have to pay a lot of money to get those skills, those aren't the bits that are intractably difficult. There are two intractably difficult bits of being good at deploying AI in organizations. The first is how well engineered is your training data. If you work in an organization like Rolls-Royce or like Bank of America or like Marks & Spencer or like any organization that's been around for more than 25 years, a significant proportion of your data will be in a terrible condition. It will be siloed. It will be on mainframes. It will not have been collected in a way that was tailored to be able to use for building models. People will fight over the ownership of it. They won't want to give it up. They will feel threatened when you ask for it. And then you have to go through an effort cycle of about 70 to 80% of your time just cleaning and engineering that data for it to be able to be consumed to even start the process of building out a model and being able to draw insights from that model. So that's the first intractable problem. The second intractable problem is if you haven't done the hard yards to change the mindset of your organization, it doesn't matter if you have the most beautifully clean data in the world and the cleverest AI developers on the planet. The things that they build will sit on a digital shelf being ignored by your population. Because for AI to actually deliver value to an organization, it has to augment human intelligence. If it doesn't augment human intelligence, the humans in the organization resist it, and resist it powerfully, because it's threatening. It does feel scary. So you need to take the organization through a cultural mindset shift in order to get your company operationally ready to actually work with artificial intelligence as an augmentation to human intelligence. And so the work we do here at the factory and have been doing with Rolls-Royce over the last 4 or 5 years, it drives directly down those two channels. The technical channel, how ready are you to work with AI, and the cultural channel, how ready are you to derive value from AI. And if you can't do both of those two things, unfortunately, the most wonderfully brainy people in the middle are not necessarily going to help you get very far.
Very good, yeah, thank you. So lots of people fear that there's a lack of differentiation, and that it's also a bit of a Wild West, people are saying. Who do we turn to? There's all sorts of companies cropping up. So now it's viable because we've got the data, and many, many companies are getting venture capital backing. So there is thousands of companies out there. How do you think companies can get a differentiation in this gold rush of AI?
I think my answer would probably be about domain experience. So the other thing that isn't really talked about terribly much by those organizations who have a passionate vision for what they want to do with AI and are able to unlock venture capital to help them, is that because AI is about augmenting human intelligence, you can't really just buy it off the shelf. if you're just simply buying an application, unless it's a very, very simple process, and there are some very simple processes where you can do that, but for the most part, you need to wrap that application in a lot of domain experience and capability in order to help support that cultural change I talked about. So when you're looking to differentiate yourself, or if you're looking for differentiation in suppliers of artificial intelligence platforms and applications, you want to be asking them, how well do you understand my business? How experienced are you in my domain? Can you give me examples of where you've solved this problem for organizations that look like me? It's the reason why the R² Factory focuses on mission critical, asset intensive, physically process driven industries, because those are industries that look like Rolls-Royce. And so when we engage with them and their problems, we already understand their domain as well as having that technical capability. And I think that's what is the real differentiation.
Let's move on to the topic of trust. We talked a lot about this in the interview, which features heavily in the book. So is it enough to build AI that is trustworthy? Is that sufficient?
Now, this is a very challenging question, right? And we talked about this in the book. So it is entirely possible to build a trustworthy AI, right? That is an ML model or an artificial intelligence application that is trustworthy, i.e. it does what you want it to do, and it's completely evil.
Yeah.
Right? Because all trustworthy means is when I start it running and I give it the inputs that I have checked are the right inputs, the outputs that I get are what I expect them to be. So if I want to set up an AI to, manipulate voting patterns in the context, let's suggest, of a referendum, then I can do that in a way which is entirely trustworthy in that it achieves its end, but whether or not it's something that we want is a different question. So it's not enough to simply have trustworthiness. You need to put AI into an ethical framework that reflects yourselves, your business's position in the world, but also, of course, the society in which your business operates.
Brilliant, thank you. We've got one more question for Caroline, then we'll move on to Lord Tim, who's sitting patiently. So my last question really is about the R² Factory. Just like to hear your vision for what it is, how are you going to collaborate with industry?
So this has been 5 years in the making. We're very excited. We are ourselves launching at the end of this month, as I mentioned before. For us, in the context of the industrial applications of AI, there are enormous opportunities to solve some really, really challenging problems that this world faces. And if I'm really honest, many of the organizations that we engage with naturally in that mission-critical, asset-intensive space have been perceived in recent times as part of that problem. They tend to be very heavy industrial organizations. They tend to be quite carbon intensive. For example, so from a sustainability question, there's a really big ask on those organizations to actually step up and try to solve some of those problems that they have been part of the contribution towards. So for us, the R² Factory is a place where those sorts of organizations can come together, can collaborate safely, to address some really hard societal problems. We're talking about questions of sustainability. We're talking about questions of human rights and safety across complex supply chains. We're talking about questions of ethics in terms of the deployment of AI. We're talking about questions about what does it mean to shift an entire category of your employment population in an economy from essentially a kind of manual set of processes to a set of AI augmented processes. What do we do about the skills that we need, and what do we do about retraining and re-employing people who are perhaps not able to go on that skills journey? Those are the sorts of questions we want to explore here at the R² Factory. And our model is one of trusted collaboration. When we talk about this place that you're in today, we describe it as a safe space to do hard things. And that's exactly what we want to use it for.
Fantastic. Round of applause for Caroline. Next, I'd like to invite Lord Tim Clement-Jones CBE, who is the former chair of the House of Lords Select Committee on AI and co-chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for AI, which I'm also a member of. So, Lord Tim,
thanks,
come and
Katie.
join me. again, I've had a fantastic interview in the book with Lord Tim, with some wonderful insights, and again, just want to bring them to life. You can read the book, hopefully you'll buy a copy of it afterwards, but but I wanted to just bring it alive and just draw out some of those questions as we did with Caroline. So let's start by just asking you, maybe you could give some of the businesses here today, as I mentioned, all different industry sectors, education, banking, law, media. What do you believe needs to happen in terms of bridging the gap between the what of responsible AI and the how, which is really important, of the corporate behaviour? How do we actually go about implementing that?
Well, thank you, Katie. And first of all, I just want to say this is one hell of a factory, Caroline. I don't think I have been in a factory of this quality before. I think only Rolls-Royce could describe this as a factory, but it's a terrific place, and it's great that you've made the place available before your formal launch. So thank you very much indeed, and congratulations on the launch of the book, Katie, because it's terrific. And really that brings me to the point of your question, because you make a great deal of play about strategy, and actually you talk about marketing and sales, but you go much broader than that in the book, quite rightly, because in a sense all that is inseparable from working out at the very top level of the company about the adoption of new technology. What are the values that you want to adopt? What ethical framework are you going to surround it with? And, the adoption of some new technology has not involved boards or senior executives in any kind of decision-making about the purpose of the new technology, about the values that you want it to represent. And so I think it's very important. The more intelligent the technology, the more important it is that at that very top level of the company, you really are advertent. You can't just leave it to the CTO or the CIO. You've got to start thinking about the impact. And so I would say you've got to think about the purpose and the values and so on. And so you've got to start with some fundamental questions. And I like to think that what you really need to start with is some kind of impact assessment. Now, Caroline is the master of the impact assessment. We'll probably talk about what Rolls-Royce have done in that respect later on. But you've got to think about, what is the impact going to be on your employees? What's the impact going to be on your stakeholders? There are so many questions that need answering. Is it going to contribute towards sustainability, to the economy, to society? What user input within your own business? Is this something that you just impose on people within the business, or are you actually going to make sure that you iterate with their help and benefit? And the word augment that Caroline used is extremely important, because, if you just treat it, and this is a very strong cultural issue, that I absolutely agree with. If you just treat it as something that's substitutional, then you're not going to get very far. You're going to have people digging their heels in. So that's important too. And then again, if it's a consumer-facing AI product, what standards are you going to apply? So at every level, you've got to think about this. And I like to think of it actually as a kind of almost like a mainstream risk assessment. What's the risk appetite for the adoption of this kind of new technology? And that means you need, at board level, at audit and risk committee level, you need really to think about this in a very holistic way. But I don't think we're there yet in many, many businesses.
So you've touched on it there already. Is this a real opportunity for radical changes in corporate governance?
Well, I think it really actually prompts us to think much more carefully about what the purpose of a company is, what the values are. Because if when you're installing new technology of this kind, you're not thinking about the purpose and the values, I don't think you're going to get very far. You're going to find, implementation of change is going to be extremely difficult. So, yes, I do. And I think it's a big chance to think about how it fits into your ESG program. I mean, if you don't have an ESG program, then you need to start, getting one pretty rapidly.
Sustainability, for those that aren't quite sure what that is.
And if you don't, it fits within the G very, very firmly, but also within the other parts in terms of the E, sustainability and so on. You've got to see where it fits within the company. And so I've always thought that AI is a great chance to actually reinvent the way that companies and businesses think about themselves. And I don't think it's something, just to really nail the point, it isn't something that a board or senior executives can simply delegate. You don't simply say, I'm going to have an executive who makes it their business to make sure we've got ethical AI, and you have a little office at the back of the building somewhere. That is, that is not the way. That it's got to be absolutely in the warp and weft of the way that business is operated. And I can't tell you, the more and more there's an acceptance that ethics and business has to be intertwined with new technology. Some of your fellow authors. I mean, you're all going down the same avenue, which is really important.
Absolutely. So what about transparency? So when you think about organisations implementing this and making sure that their employees are aware of what's actually happening and the decision making that's actually happening there, are you actually seeing it happening in practice where they're informing people about how they're introducing new technology, what impact it's going to have on staff jobs, what impact it's going to have on the end customer as well? Is that happening in practice? We know it should be.
Well, I thought about this quite carefully, and look, we're in a Rolls-Royce building here with an Adam ceiling, Rolls-Royce absolutely got this right. They thought about this in terms of, what kind of score box, what kind of ethical framework do we need right from the outset? You have to think about how this is going to impact and how, in a sense, you judge all the elements by reference to ethics or human rights or whatever it may be. And there are quite a number of score boxes out there, but there aren't many corporates who've actually got their own bespoke framework, like Rolls-Royce, the Alethea framework, and I've copied. I'm shameless about copying the Rolls-Royce framework. I've used it for the Institute for AI in Education. I've recommended it to other people because it's a great way of it's a checklist. You don't need anything very complicated. I mean, boards of directors don't need anything very complicated. Perhaps they don't quite always have the skills that they need, and this is one of the part of the themes of your book that actually, people need to wake up to what's necessary in terms of board skills. But, this is a very easy way of doing it. Now, very, very few businesses are doing that currently. It's always parceled up. We're in this bit of technology, that bit of technology. It's not seen holistically. And I think the worst offenders, and I don't know whether Roger Taylor will back me up on this, but the CDI, when he was chair, did a huge amount of work on kind of risk barometer in terms of government use of AI and other sectors. And it's really important for them to actually get this right. And governments are one of the worst offenders, in my view. I mean, there's a wonderful CDDO, the new Central Digital and Data Office, who produced this kind of algorithmic transparency standard. Well, it's virtually, it's so opaque that I doubt whether many of us in this room would really understand it. But it's actually a tool for them to understand what their own government departments are doing. This is not a tool to show the world what the government is doing. So, I mean, the purpose of the whole exercise seems to be extraordinary. I would want to see if the government is taking decisions about me by various forms of AI or algorithm or whatever it may be, I would want to see a public register that tells me that, Universal Credit is using a particular form of algorithm, or the prison services or the probation service is using a particular algorithm, because that then helps them judge whether I'm a risk on being released from jail or whatever it may be. So, there are very few good examples of transparency. So I can say that within this building with some safety.
You've touched on some of those complexities there, and I talked a bit about healthcare, and it's a question I asked everybody I interviewed for the book. Are you optimistic about the potential of AI in our lives and in our businesses? Are you optimistic about the impact it's going to have in a safe way, in a way that enhances our lives and our businesses?
I mean, yes is the answer. because I'm a great believer in AI being, a tool that we can use in so many ways to solve things like the Sustainable Development Goals and so on. So I am an optimist. I'm not, blindly optimistic, but I do believe that it does have will have a huge impact in the future. The big problem in the UK, and you've asked me specifically about the UK, and others don't always have this attitude, is that we seem to regard regulation and governance as being a sort of limit on innovation, and we... Yes, and they seem to think, oh, no, and the government has this attitude that regulation is the enemy of innovation. And I don't believe that. I think if you get standards which are readily accepted, and the British Standards Institute is beavering away as we speak, doing quite a lot of good work in this area with the cooperation of business. And in same with data protection, we had the new direction paper from the government, which seemed to imply that if we only tore up the GDPR, everything would be absolutely fine, Whereas that is complete nonsense. And in fact, there's one really key protection, Article 22. It's not perfect by any manner of means for the ordinary citizen against automated decision making, to make sure that, they do have the right to challenge. And the government seem to be, it's not entirely clear whether they're going to agree with Ian Duncan Smith, but, they do seem to be saying, let's tear up Article 22. Whereas I would say, let's make Article 22 rather more comprehensive, because it's full of loopholes. I want people to be able to challenge AI decisions, even if a human has some intervention in the decision-making process. Well, that's maybe all a bit technical in terms of GDPR, but it demonstrates that the government is very, very equivocal about the benefits of regulation, and that's what worries me about the forthcoming AI white paper. If it's just going to be filling in little gaps here and there, rather than something that actually you can take down and you can say, right, if I go through these steps, then I'm in good shape. That's what I want to see, in terms of risk assessment, impact assessment, and so on. I hope that comes out. We're due to have it in late spring, early summer. Civil servants define things rather differently. Summer probably means September. Spring probably means July, so we'll see what happens.
I have one last question, similar to the one I asked Caroline, which is, how do you believe boards need to ensure they've got the right skills? And it will lead us on nicely to Code First Girls, but how can we ensure in our companies that we have the right skills to take advantage of this kind of technology?
Well, I think that's the $64,000 question. Our select committee looked at this, and a theme that absolutely ran through the whole report was the need for diversity. It basically was all about how do you spot bias? How do you make sure that you've got the right, you're using all the talents? How do you secure creativity in the workforce and so on? And by the way, what we haven't touched on is media literacy, digital literacy, which I think is very important, and that ties in again with diversity. But, I work with a lot of and admire a huge number of there are some very prominent women in the AI field, people like Tabitha Goldstaub, Jacqueline de Rochas, Joanna Shields, Sana Karagani, yourself, and you all lead the charge, and we got some brilliant academics and authors like Kate Crawford, Hannah Fry, Cathy O'Neill, Stephanie Hare. But at the business level, we're going to have to clone Caroline, I think, actually. This is the deficient area, and that's why, people like Anna need to thrive and prosper, and make sure we have more people like Isabel, from whom you are going to hear very shortly.
Thank you very much. Big round of applause for your team. So I'm going to call up Anna Brailsford, who is the CEO of Code First Girls, which is a social impact organisation which is about eliminating this diversity gap that Lord Tim talked about in technology, offering free education, and we're also going to hear a chat with Anna and with Isabel Scavetta, who's one of the alumna from Code First Girls. She went through that programme and she's now a product manager in the tech sector. So she's going to share with Anna the journey between them. So we'll hear from Anna and from Isabel now, and then we'll break and have some canapés and some more drinks. So thank you very much.
I just want to say a big thank you for inviting us here today. When I heard that I was coming to talk about AI and ML, I think it's considerably more fun when there's margaritas involved. And only Rolls-Royce, Manisha and Caroline would make that happen. Somehow you brought three completely different elements together and made it work. So, fantastic. Isabel, welcome.
Thank you.
And I'm actually going to let you introduce yourself before I sort of introduce what Code First Girls does.
Sure, sounds great. So to kick us off, hi everyone, lovely to meet you. My name is Isabel Scavetta. To give you maybe a bit of a backstory as to why I'm up here today with Anna, I think we can all agree that graduating from uni in any year is terrifying, but I had the great fortune of being in the class of 2020. As you can imagine, my entire world was uprooted. At the time, I was studying languages. I had no idea what to do. So I decided to do quite a disruptive thing in a disruptive year and heard about Code First Girls. So I'd always had a background interest in technology, had no idea if I could do anything to do with it. Chose all the wrong subjects, I guess, at 16, because I didn't really feel like I had the support to pursue them. And started with CFG. Loved it, had the great fortune of then being placed on an internship in R-Square Data Labs under the leadership of Caroline. And that was really a huge accelerant for me in realizing, one, this is an issue I'm incredibly passionate about and really felt I could thrive in, but two, to start giving back to communities and organizations like Code First Girls. So returned as a Python instructor, started getting involved in more like boards and committees, thinking about how do we get more entry-level talent from underrepresented groups into the industry, for which I've started winning a couple of awards and things like that, most recently from McKinsey Digital, and very passionate about everything that CFG do, and very grateful for really kickstarting my career in this sector.
Quite frankly, when I turn on the BBC, I don't know how many times I'm going to see Isabel. So that's usually a measure. I check in on how you're doing. So just to place this in context, so Code First Girls trains up women for free. That's very important because there's massive financial barriers that prohibit women from getting into the tech industry. So we have a very subversive model. We train women up and we place them within companies. Fantastic example is Rolls-Royce, but also within the room today, I've heard that BT are here, which is fantastic. We've got a really big scheme going with BT, and also Bank of America that we've worked with for over 5 years. So some of our clients are in the room as well as government. We're working actively with government departments, which we'll touch on a bit later. So, Isabel, can you talk about how important it is to develop alternative routes into tech?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think what's really important for everyone to remember, especially the question that we get all the time is, where are the women? Why are people not in this industry? What's happening? And I would really encourage everyone to think about how women are repeatedly boxed out of the pipeline at every step in the process. We choose, in the UK at least, we choose our A-levels at 16 years old. I, at that time, had no idea what I wanted to do and just went with kind of what I was interested in. Then again, if you do pursue something technical, you get to university, you look around, already you're a minority in your cohort, already you don't know what opportunities there are to you. You graduate, you don't see many role models in the sector, which is why books like Katie's are fantastic for kind of bringing that visibility, but you don't know what you're going to do. And then finally, when you're in industry, there's not a lot to help retain you and keep you there. So when we're looking for more diverse talent, we have to look in more diverse places. If you're looking at that original pipeline, you're already boxing out so many people who could have amazing talent to succeed, but they didn't know what cookie cutter path they should be choosing because there's no kind of direction for them to be following. So yeah, I studied all the wrong subjects. I guess I fit lots of the wrong demographics to be your typical person in AI, and I see that all the time, in my day job and things like that. So it's really important we look in other places for that talent.
So Code First Girls has taught over 50,000 women. It's estimated that we've influenced over 93% of those into careers in tech. I guess when you got to Code First Girls, were you here are all the women? Yeah. I found them all. Yeah. This is the secret supply, where have you been?
It's amazing. And whenever I talk about, for example, when I'm out and about, let's be honest, at the pub, and I say I work in AI, and people go, oh, great, so tell me a bit, are there other women you work with? And everyone I know through CFG. I go, yeah, I know, amazing. I've got a friend, she was an art teacher, now she's a software engineer. I've got a friend who's an amazing writer. She now is, again, doing some amazing things in engineering. So it gives that platform, and really you cannot underestimate that support. Like the amount of phone calls I have with women at other organisations, all doing different things, but we're really united by a shared vision. I think CFG do an amazing job really distilling that, because everyone I meet through CFG, everyone who has come through CFG has done something brave. Every single girl or woman or whoever it might be who signs up for a course for CFG does something that no one was expecting them to and decides to pursue an interest. And like you said, the financial barrier piece is really important, because that's terrifying. It's really scary. I remember being on my first Python class, sat with Hello World, thinking I was going to have a breakdown. Exactly. So that's why things like this course is really important to kind of, here are the women. Like, we're here, we're ready. We just need someone to give us a chance to step into this space so we can start disrupting it.
And the diversity stats are astounding around this.
Yeah.
So at the moment, we estimate at Code First Girls, we're teaching probably in excess of 4 times the amount that the entire UK university system combined is teaching. If we rely on that alone, we estimate there's going to be 3 million open roles in these areas by 2025. If we're lucky, there'll be 26,000 women graduates in those areas by 2025. That means we're going to have 1 qualified woman for every 115 roles if we continue to rely on higher education alone. And this is why things like Code First Girls are so important. Can you tell us a bit more about what you consider to be the pipeline crisis? What's going on here? How can we get more women in?
Sure. I think, as I said, I touched on before, but I think it's come up in a couple of the spotlight kind of talks today. The pipeline crisis is that we've got a bad combination, right? Like I said, we're boxed out every single way of the pipeline, like diverse talent, never mind from anything more intersectional. We're boxed out at every single stage of the traditional recruitment process. That combined with the huge UK digital skills gap that we're seeing, that we're not really being taught the right things because the education system can't keep up with the incredible pace of change in the AI industry, it means that we're stuck in a very difficult position that very few people were trained in the right things, and the people who are trained in the right things probably all look and sound the same. So that also leads to a lot of sloppiness, I think, especially in corporate settings. People are hiring, they're desperate to hire. They will take whoever they can that fits those boxes that, again, like to go back to Caroline's point, that their recruitment AI is screening them through like CVs and CVs that look the same, that have got that computer science degree, like seem to have the right kind of experience. And because of that, we're getting very one-dimensional AI teams. So I think it is absolutely a crisis. And like you say, there's such a gap between the qualified people and the people who have the potential and they have the drive, but they don't have the opportunities. So we need as many stopgap measures as possible to help align those two to bring the UK into a successful digital-first future.
You studied European social and political studies at university.
Yes.
Second time that Europe's been brought up tonight, strangely.
Yeah.
To what extent did you feel labelled, and did you feel that you couldn't move into tech because of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very difficult piece. So primarily, if no one knows what that degree means, my parents don't know either. I don't think I really know, but it was basically a combination of both languages and humanities. And I think that makes me an amazing product manager, because I was having this conversation just before, but what it basically means is I'm really used to taking lots of different concepts in lots of different spaces and understanding how to translate that to someone. Like, I'm working with stakeholders, I'm working with like my leadership team, I'm working with clients, and I'm trying to figure out what is their most painful thing that is keeping them up at night that they just can't get past. And then I take all of that and I can translate that to my engineering team and say, the number one thing we're going to build is this capability. It's literally going to change everything that our client knows, and kind of bridging that gap. So as a languages student, I think it's incredibly relevant and incredibly powerful. But a lot of people do question that career, like that career switch. They find it difficult. Again, another conversation I was just having, like the McKinsey Award I won, they basically sponsor a series of awards for underrepresented talent. And I won the LGBT division of that. And I really struggled to publicize that, because I thought at the time, this transition is so huge that if I come out with this, people are going to think, oh, it's because it's, they've got to fill their quotas. They've got certain amounts of like women, whatever it is, whatever intersection you fall under, that they need to fill. And this is just like exercises that they're shunting people through. So that's why I think this visibility is really important, just to show like it can be done. It's not easy, but ultimately the industry is here to support you. we all know it's so important to get more people in, and there's so many schemes that are crying out for you to get involved. Like, let's try and get as many people into those as possible.
So let's talk about that, the fact you felt like a quota, right?
Yes, yeah.
So I've noticed in the time I've been at Code First Girls that I feel like we've moved from this being a CSR agenda, some would say fluffy, some would say a tick box activity, to being actually part of a company's competitive advantage. And more recently, I have to say, we work with the likes of GCHQ, we supply women to Cobra, we are also supplying women to the likes of BAE Systems. In an environment like this, it's actually been put on the national security agenda. Diversity is strength, and it means that we're not producing products, systems, algorithms that look and sound the same. We're producing something that's actually far stronger as a result. Do you think it's now moved into a necessity as opposed to a nice to have and a tick box activity?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we called it a pipeline crisis for a reason, right? This is a very real issue that at its highest level does affect things like our national security. If we're only looking for threats coming from one direction or thinking about resolving those threats in one way, all it takes is for someone to come at it from a different angle, for an entire team to be totally blindsided. Whereas, you know, if we got together the minds of everyone in this room and gave them the same problem, I'm sure we would get a much more rounded and multifaceted answer to that, much more tried and tested, you know, and especially again on issues like security. That's the most important thing I think we can ask for. So I think we've definitely moved beyond, and I think hopefully we're seeing this kind of on more of like the national and global scale, you know, getting more diverse voices in the room isn't a choice, and it's something that needs to happen now. Like, tomorrow was too late, and the way that we're progressing towards, for example, better gender diversity is going to take decades. We don't have decades. This is something we need immediately. So whatever we can do to bridge that gap is incredibly important.
Isabel, what would you say to people in the room from different organisations and prominent members of government? What would you say, maybe even press? Yeah. What would you say if you could give them one piece of advice or be in their shoes for one day?
I would just, if there's anything that you're going to take away from this, I think I would really encourage you just to think about what issues you come across in your daily life and how someone else might think about them differently. Because no matter what you do, from the second you wake up and the second you go to bed, you make a million different choices. And the way in which you've grown up and the experiences that you've had and who you are as a person shapes every single one of those. So if you think about that like that, if you then apply that to whatever you do, if that's government, if it's press, if it's, you know, cutting edge AI, think about how someone else might think about them differently, and then go find someone who thinks like that. Because I think that's the best way to stress test a lot of our own assumptions, a lot of the ways that we do things. I am sure I'm an absolute nightmare of AI. I guess I'm not artificial, but a nightmare of intelligence, because I've got loads of biases, and the only way I'm going to deconstruct those is speaking to other people. So that would be my key takeaway, like, strengthen your own views by sharing them with other people.
And there's strength in diversity of thought, and that would be my key takeaway here as well. We talk a lot about data sets, and that data sets have to be diverse, and the AI is only going to be as good as the data that goes in. But also think about the teams that are constructing this as well. To what extent are you being challenged about the way you think, and challenged to think differently? And in that way, we'll produce far more diverse and stronger products, hopefully for the whole country and the whole economy, not just for individual companies as well. Thank you, Isabel.
Just want to say a big thank you to all of the speakers this evening. Thank you very much.